Good evening, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of Beer Rating with Sean Connors. So I'll just give my glass a quick cold water rinse as per usual. We'll open up this week's flavor, see what we're going to do here. This is a new beer that I just recently got. My one of my other nieces just came back from, well, she's visiting from New Brunswick, but she just did a trip to PEI and brought this back for me. Alright, so we got quite a bit of head there, so I'll let that settle. I should have known that before I poured it. The beer is Persistence 100% Brett IPA. It says limited edition after hours series, Prince Edward Island Brewing Company. It's a strong beer, 6%. Handcrafted in Prince Edward Island. Gives the address. And it says notes. It said a simple pale ale grist fermented with 100 Brettanomyces yeast. Citrusy hops amp up the fruity flavors, and it's bottle conditioned. Alright, so once again, I'm just going to let that settle for a second. Definitely smells like an IPA. As I said, it's a strong beer, 6%, so it's not super strong, but you know, our regular beer is 4.5%, 5%, so a little bit strong. The PEI Brewing Company has been around since 2012. However, originally the company started in 1987, I believe, as Murphy's Brewing, and then in 2000 it was overtaken again, I believe, by Graham House, and eventually became the PEI Brewing Company. And this one, as I said, it's limited edition. They say it's a limited edition one-off. If you go on the website, which is, I think, PEIbrewingcompany.com, yep, they say, although it's an IPA, they say, I'm going to read this so I don't mix it up. They say it's bottle conditioned, dry hop, Brett Saison fermented with 100% Brettanomyces yeast, which gives it a tropical fruit plus milk funk aroma and flavor. Citrusy hops amp up the fruity flavor. This is mild bitterness, high carbonation, very dry finish. Now, high carbonation, citrusy, and is normal for a saison, which I'll get to in a second. And normally with a saison, it's normally a little bit spicy. This one didn't say anything about that. Now, if you're like me, you read that description they gave, and if you're not a beer expert, a lot of it probably didn't make any sense to you. So I just want to go over their description of the beer and try to interpret for others like me who might not be a beer expert. Okay, they say it's a limited edition one-off. So limited edition, that's pretty straightforward. It's only available for a limited time. One-off basically means they brewed it with no plans to brew it again. It's a one-time brew. However, I've seen from other breweries, they've done a one-off and it became such a hit that they brought it back. So that is possible, but normal with a one-off, there's no intentions to bring it back. Not saying it won't come back, but there's no intentions to. Alright, also in the description say bottle conditioned. And all that basic means, it means the yeast naturally carbonate the beer after the fermentation. Most beers, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. Most beers, you know, there's extra carbonation in the form of CO2 added, whether it's on tap or in the bottle or in the can. However, with bottle conditioned, that's normally not the case. That's my understanding. Alright, they said it was dry hopped, and basically dry hops means the hops are added specifically for flavor and aroma and not for bitterness. Normal, a regular beer, the whole row of the hops is to add bitterness, because it's without the hops it would be really sweet. And dry hop, basically, it's not boiled. So I could be wrong once again, but I believe there is hops added in the boiling stage. However, the dry hop is added later, and it's not boiled, and it's basically act as a preservative, which as an IPA, if you watch any of the other videos with IPAs, Indian Pale Ale, originally when England was occupying India, they had a lot of soldiers on hand, obviously, for the occupation, and British soldiers, like soldiers all over the world, they liked their beer. But the problem was, the beer at the time in Britain on the trip to India, it would have gone bad. So what they did, they added extra hops as a preservative. So by the time the beer got to India, it was still ripe for the drinking, okay for the drinking, and that was because of the extra hops added as a preservative. And they also call it well, the name itself, 100% Brett IPA. If you're like me, you're probably saying, okay, who's this Brett guy? Brett is actually the name of the yeast. It's a Brettanomyces. I could be not pronouncing that 100% correctly, but that's basically, it's a type of wild yeast that they use. All right, I'm going to finish up this, and still got a little bit more I want to talk about. All right, so it's obviously, it's a golden color. It's by no means clear. It's definitely cloudy. And my understanding is with the bottle condition, there's actually extra yeast in there to make the carbonization. So a lot of times with bottle conditioned beer, you're going to have the yeast, once it dies off or whatever, it settles in the bottom of the glass. And a lot of people, they'll leave the last quarter of an inch or whatever. Other people pour it in. That's my understanding of cloudiness. Okay, and finally they said it's a saison. You might be saying, okay, I've seen the name, you go to the liquor store, you see the name saison, but what is actually a saison? Well, the word saison is French for season. And the saison was a category beer. It wasn't a specific style of beer. My understanding was a category beer in a specific Belgian province. And it was brewed normally in the cooler months. Normally it was brewed in spring specifically for summer drinking. Back then there was no refrigeration, so the cooler months was the best time to brew beer. It was a refreshing summer drink specifically for the farm workers. It was basically, as we said before, beer was basically safer to drink than water. So they would give the saison was brewed a lot of times specifically for the farm workers. And at that time, different than today, it was normally low alcohol, probably around 2%, mainly because they were feeding this or giving this to the workers to drink, and you're talking about, they're probably drinking several liters a day. So you obviously didn't want them to get pissed drunk, so it was a low alcohol beer. And I said it was cooler months. Another reason it was brewed in the cooler months is because in the summer, because of the heat, there would be more bacteria in the air, which could, sorry about that, which could contaminate the brewing process. So there you go. So there's my description of this beer. Get down to the taste. As I said, I should have known when it's with a saison, they're normally highly carbonated, and I knew that. So I should have been a little bit more careful when I poured it. Well, it's definitely a tasty beer. If you like IPAs, you're probably going to enjoy this one. I'm not really getting a lot of it's definitely refreshing. I'm not a huge IPA fan. I know a lot of people that are. So if you like IPA, you might like it a lot more than I do. I'm not saying I don't like it, but generally IPAs I can take them or leave them. Alright, so I got to give this one a rating. We pretty well talked about it. There's not a lot of aftertaste, which they say a very dry finish, and definitely the carbonation. They say mild bitterness. For me, I'm getting a little bit more than the mild, which is kind of what I expected from my IPA. I'm not getting a lot of the fruity flavors. If you're an IPA fan, I'd love for somebody to pick one up just to see if you're finding a lot of difference between a regular IPA. From their website, their description, they kind of said, although it's an IPA, and then they gave the description that I read out. To me, it's kind of, like I said, I'm not a big IPA fan, but I'm kind of getting a regular IPA flavor. I'm leaning towards a 3 or 3.5. I think I'm comfortable giving it a 3. Yeah, I think I'll stick with my 3. So here you go, folks. That's my rating for the limited edition after hours series from Prince Edward Island Brewing Company, the Persistence 100% Brett IPA. I think I'm comfortable giving it a 3.0. So there you go, folks. That's my rating for this week. As always, until next beer, enjoy responsibly. Cheers.